it's you know, I love getting a glimpse of how different clubs operate and seeing the close bonds that you guys have with each other, and you know, it's great. Um, I'd love to get a little flavor for what the club is about. You know, what kind of what parts of our wonderful hobby do you guys tend to hang out in? Are you guys low banders? I heard a public service report.
Wait,
Um,
you want me to do it, Walter, or you want to do it?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Can you hear me okay, Jim?
sure, yeah.
Okay, all right. Our club is predominantly, I think, focused on operating. We have a large group of HF type people. We also have a public service group, and all of us participate in public service in the area here. Amir, who's on tonight, is our Aries head for the area. Walt's our public service chairman. We normally do 5 to 6, maybe more public service events a year. Obviously, they've been curtailed since the advent of COVID came in. We normally would have had a busy. Well, we didn't have the St. Patrick's Day parade. That's a big one that got canceled early on, and then we usually have a couple of marathons and lots of foot races and things like that throughout the year. So we've got an active group. We've probably got 30 people that are truly, the club's got about 130 members. We've probably got 30 active in public service, VHF, UHF type stuff. We assist one of the local clubs, Lark, who we have some people on tonight from Lark who do a pumpkin patrol. That will be going on coming up the end of October. That's to watch the overpasses on the thruway, New York State Thruway. But we don't organize that, but we certainly support and participate. We try to focus with our programs on operating practices, occasional rebuild of something somebody found at a ham fest, that kind of thing. I think we got an age group from you know, the normal 25, 30 up to a few on the other side of 80, but not very many. But we got a wide. But most of us were all young in mind and certainly love the hobby. So that's kind
Okay,
of a
great.
that's kind of a thumbnail sketch.
That's great. That's great. How about home stations and towers? Let's start to touch on the topic.
We have a few people with towers, don't we, Frank? Frank?
Frank?
Frank? He may be
Okay.
up on the
Yeah,
tower.
I had it on mute.
He's out there. It's
Yeah,
dark,
we have some
but he
folks.
can be.
We have some folks. We have some folks with towers, and
Yeah,
we
we have
have
a tower down too.
and we have a lot of folks that put stuff up in the air. Whether it's you know, we have a lot of people on the roof and things like that too. So
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. When I talk to groups, there are many different angles on this and perspectives that you might come at it from. Certainly, one is being a tower owner and climber, but there's also the tower owner who has friends and others come over to help, and there are those who come over to help and may be ground crew. Um, I think this material should be of interest to all of them. Okay, let's see about sharing. Yes, I can share. Okay, perfect. And I can share this screen. And let's switch over to slideshow mode. And I hope you see my screen.
you.
And you see a little window of me in the upper right.
And I see you talking in the upper right.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, good. Okay, super. The message here is, and I think you're going to hear it loud and clear, is that it really is time for our community to make some serious changes in order to address what's become a rather serious issue around safety. On the second guy in from the left, Paul Bittner, W2AE. Anybody know that call?
Yep.
Paul was up on one of his 48 some odd towers and lost his life when he fell from very high, and it was a very unfortunate accident, but it was the first of quite a few that have occurred over the last 2 years. When I first started doing this, I had heard about Paul in October, and then in July, the guy on the far right here, Joe, K1JGA, lost his life
Huh.
in a tower accident really close by to me. I had met him, just briefly met him at a breakfast or something in the area. And but certainly a bunch of my colleagues in the area, in the Boston area, and southern New Hampshire area knew him, and it was a pretty shocking loss. At the New England Division ARL convention in 2019, I was asked to do a presentation on this topic because I had just raised some concerns over whether losing 2 hams in less than a year seemed to be out of line for tower work. And as I did that work to prepare that presentation, I learned of these 2 other people who had lost their lives. So in that period from September 29th to 2018 to July 27, 2019, we had lost four individuals. This sounded pretty bad, and I thought it was well worth the investigation that I was doing. Unfortunately, it's gotten a lot worse. This is data that's been that I've collected since then. One actually occurred during that period, during that same year, January 26th. We lost Richard Chris, AA5VU. And then these 3 other fatalities occurred just in the last month, August 17th to well, month and a half.
Quiet.
Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about the nature of what these people were doing, some of them, what kinds of problems are behind this, and about ways that we can deal with this in the future. Okay, so 8 accidents in 24 months. When I started looking into this, I was only aware of the 4, and I ended up wanting to answer first the question, with these numbers, are these extraordinary numbers? Is this more than we should expect, or is it sort of the cost of what we do? And to do that, I really needed to dig in and understand more. A first place that I looked was in the world of the workplace. OSHA and the Bureau of Labor Statistics track fatalities in the course of doing work in the workplace. They track the number of workers, and they track the number of fatalities that occur in each of many, many different occupations. And I wanted to use something as a benchmark to compare the level of this kind of incident that's happening in our world to something else, something that made sense to compare to. What they do is they allow you to compare one occupation to another in terms of its safety record by normalizing the number of fatalities per worker, or essentially they do it per 100,000 workers. Okay, so for every occupation, they estimate the number of workers that are in that occupation during a year, and then they take the number of fatalities that occur in that occupation on the job and divide, and you get a number of, you get this ratio. And if you look at all occupations combined, including, ranging from the safest desk jobs to the, most dangerous jobs, you get this number, 3.6 fatalities per 100,000 workers every year. Okay, this does not include things like fatal car accident on the way to work. It's really on the job, an on-the-job injury. Okay. Now, amongst all these different occupations, there certainly are occupations that we might consider comparing amateur radio tower work with. And the first one that I looked at was commercial tower climbing, maintaining cell towers and radio and TV towers. In the US, there are around 300,000 commercial towers. And to maintain and install those towers, there are about 5,000 workers doing that work. Now that's full-time equivalent workers. There are many who are part-timers. Hope everybody's familiar with that concept of full-time equivalent. Basically, if you and I both do work 50% of the week, together you and I make up one full-time equivalent worker.
Hello.
Okay. And during a 9-year period, 90 people lost their lives in the course of doing commercial tower work. And that comes out to about 10 a year. And when we normalize that, when we run that up using that calculation that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses, you get this number of 200 per 100,000. Okay, so this is our benchmark number, and this was actually done during a period when there was great concern about the safety in that community. There was a feeling that the level of fatalities was way too high. So guess what? Now we got to compare to amateur radio, and we can. What we did was to make an estimate of the number of amateur radio towers in the U.S. And that took a lot of work. I can get into how we did that, but the number that we came up with was 38,000, and we feel that we're pretty comfortable that that number is in the right ballpark. And we assumed that every one of those towers required a full day, 24 hours of climber time per year to maintain it. And that's spread out over the course of the tower's entire lifetime. Most of the people that I speak to when thinking about all of the towers in our community probably believe that that's a pretty conservative number, meaning it's a high estimate. When you do that, and you calculate how many individual full-time equivalent tower climbers that equates to, it turns out to be this number about 450. Well, in that 12-month period, we had 4 fatalities amongst 456 full-time equivalent climbers, which gives us a ratio, a fatality rate of 878 per 100,000. So that now we can compare the two. And this is clearly a much higher ratio, a much worse ratio for us. Okay, 4 times. So bad news there. I wasn't satisfied with just looking at one occupation or one activity, so I decided we ought to look at something else. And what did I pick? I picked skydiving, amateur skydiving. Across the U.S., there are about 3.5 million jumps done by amateurs in the U.S. This is the data from 2018. And during that same period, the U.S. Parachute Association, which tracks these numbers, noted that there were 13 skydiver fatalities during that same period. So now we can do another one of these ratios, right? And if we do that, for every 250,000 jumps out of an airplane with a parachute, we lose 1 skydiver, 250,000. Well, let's go look at what a reasonable comparison in the amateur radio tower climbing world. Again, we're talking about having lost the same four people in 12 months. So in 1 year, 4 fatalities. We made the assumption that each of those 38,000 towers required 4 climbs per year. We don't know if, it was a number based on lots of experience and looking at all these different towers around the country. Most of them sit dormant, idle in terms of maintenance for years on end. But of course, there are some like mine, which get pretty frequent climbs. What does the ratio come out to in this case? It's 38,000 to 1. Okay, so that's a lot more frequent. So we've got, look at this, commercial tower climbing 4 times more risky, and skydiving, we are 4 times more risky than commercial tower climbing, 7 times more risky than skydiving. My conclusion after looking at that is, yes, we do have a problem and we need to look at it carefully. Okay, anybody have any questions on that so far? Okay. All right, so let's keep going. So the next question is, yes, if we have a problem, can we identify any underlying causes and potential solutions to these incidents? What's going on? And the only way to do that is to start to really look closely at the data. And that took a lot of work. With a whole bunch of research in archives of our magazines, internet articles, news, all kinds of places, I was able to piece together this history of fatal amateur radio tower incidents in the US. I believe this actually goes back to 2000. But the first one that I found since starting in 2000 was in 2003. And then we have all these incidents coming up to, actually, that should say 2020, not 2019. This chart shows each of the incidents. The total number of fatalities was 20, not 18, because in one incident, 3 lives were lost in 2009. You can see that the age range kind of reflects what we know about our community. You can see that there are some, variety of different, it happens across the country. And you can see in the very short descriptions that there are some common threads in this, and we're going to get into that a lot. This chart should be a little bit alarming. Note that if we were to draw a trend line on this, it would definitely be going up. Okay. This chart breaks things down by month of the year. And what we can see here is that there's a seasonality to this problem, probably related to the fact that these are the good weather months in the US, and this is the time of year when people are doing this kind of work. So all but one of the fatalities occurred between May and October in those months. Now, when we look at these numbers and see 2 or 3 per year, we wonder whether, is this really worth looking into? I mean, we have a lot of tower climbers out there. I believe it is important because the fatalities themselves, those injuries that are severe enough to result in a death, are probably a proxy for many other injuries that are occurring. So it's not just about the guys who lost their lives. It's also about those who got themselves in trouble, had a near miss, or had some other thing happen while they were doing this kind of work. And there's some data to support that idea. In OSHA reporting, actually in the workplace, injuries are supposed to be reported. There's a requirement to report injuries on the job by OSHA. And with respect to fall type injuries, there are 183 injuries reported for every fatal fall. But we also have watchdogs in this world. And the watchdog organizations are trying to validate the numbers that are being reported by the government agencies. And they believe that these external watchdog organizations believe that in the workplace, most injuries do not get reported to OSHA for a variety of reasons. And they believe that maybe 65 to 80% of injuries are not reported. So if you take that 183 and multiply by 3 or 4, you get a number like 800 or 1,000 injuries for every fatal fall. Sorry, let me say that again. Potentially 1,000 fall-related injuries for every fatal fall-related injury that occurs in the workplace. So if we can figure out what's at the root of what we see in the fatal injuries, we can probably impact and figure out ways to deal with those. Then we can probably have some impact on a very large number of injuries as well, non-fatal injuries. Okay. In an effort to capture that, in addition to those fatal injuries that were on the other chart, I was able to add into this data set that we're going to look at, these publicized, well documented, very severe injuries that occurred in our community in the process of doing tower work. So I added these in to increase the numbers a little bit. Okay. All right. And by the way, one of these you can see happened just within the last couple of months in August. All right. Okay. So now let's start breaking down that data and take a look at what's going on. So the first question I asked is, what kind of incidents were they? What happened? And there were 4 different types of injuries involved here. First, a single one was electrocution. A second, that was small, was injured by the tower. Something happened up on the tower, and it hurt the individual to the point where it was fatal. But the other 2, the big ones, the yellow and the red, are the ones that we're going to spend most of our time on here. Yellow is free fall. That's falling off the tower, not attached. The second is falling with the tower, where the tower failed in some way and fell, and the climber was killed riding the tower to the ground. And you can see that between the 2 of those, there's an awful lot of those 2 cover the lion's share of these incidents that we're seeing. Now, here's another way of looking at this. We take those same incident types and look at when they occurred in terms of the life of the tower. So a tower really has 2 parts to it, or well, we can say 3 parts. There's the installation, which takes a day or 2. You build the tower. Then you have the maintenance of the tower and the installation of antennas and feed lines and all the other things that we do while the tower is installed. And then we have the removal of the tower. Those are the 3 phases. I've bundled together in this the left side of the slide, the installation and removal phases. So when we're actually putting the tower in or taking it down, here's what the data shows. 9 of the fatalities were falling attached to the tower, riding the tower down, and 1 was a free fall. During maintenance of the tower, during the rest of the life of the tower, which of course is many years usually, there were 0 falling with the tower attached or riding the tower down, and there were 6, or 85% of them were free falling off the tower, and 1 was injured by the tower. Okay. Now let's look at the types of towers involved in all of these incidents combined. The lion's share, a little under 75%, is guide towers. The remainder, there were a couple in here, a few of them that I could not actually, from the write-ups, I couldn't identify what type of tower they were. So the green there is unknown. And then there were a couple of self-supporting towers, either crank-ups or fixed installations. So we clearly have something to look at in terms of guide towers. Now, one thing I do not know is what the distribution is of guide versus self-supporting towers in our community. I know there's an awful lot of guide towers, but there are a good number of self-supporting towers as well. Okay. Now, if we take all of the incidents and look at those different types of accidents and what the root causes are underlying each of those types, it breaks down into 3 groups. There's when you fall with the tower, when you ride the tower to the ground, it's invariably that the tower was in a state that was unsafe for climbing when this incident happened. Okay, something about the tower was below standard, and you shouldn't, and the climber should not have been on the tower. When you fall off the tower, it's all about PPE. So we've all heard the term PPE in recent months in COVID plague land, But PPE as a concept has been around for a lot longer, and it refers to anything relating to personal protection equipment. And in this case, it's about the climber's climbing gear. And not only do you have to have the right gear, you have to use it correctly. Okay, so both the gear and technique is behind these situations when people fall off a tower. And then there's another category that emerges here. It's a smaller category, but it's those situations that don't fall into one of those two other categories. And I've labeled them as unsafe maneuvers. And unsafe maneuvers generally, they're all different kinds, but they generally fall into this category of not having the right people, the right tools, and the right expertise involved, needed to do the job properly. Okay. All right. So one more pie chart. When we break things down, and now we're breaking things down in root causes, nearly 50% are around climbing the unsafe tower. Okay, this is the situation where we get on the tower and it can't withstand the climber being on the tower. The red section here, which is a little over a third, is not climbing correctly, not climbing with the right equipment, or not climbing using a technique called free climbing. And we're going to talk about that in more detail. And then the third smaller category is the unsafe maneuvers. So if you just combine the two big ones, I call these the deadly duo. Climbing an unsafe, and I've added a word here, we're going to talk about it, but climbing an unsafe guide tower, and secondly, climbing using the wrong equipment or procedure. If we could solve both of those problems, we can eliminate, I believe, we can prevent 85% of the incidents that occur in the course of doing this activity. Okay, let me take a break there. Anybody have any comments or questions about the data? Let me just add one note. The pie charts, all the graphs that I did, were based on the data that was in before the most recent 4 incidents. I haven't had a chance to update the charts yet, but they actually tip the balance a little bit more towards the PPE, the not climbing correctly side of things. One of those incidents, let me just make sure I've got this right. Yes, one of the 4 incidents, one of them was a not a fatality. That one was an unsafe tower, and the other 3 were all falling off the tower situations where the climbing gear was improper, or the climbing technique was improper. So I'm going to talk about both of those all 3 of these actually in the next sections of the presentation. So there's a big statement here, and it's important. We knowingly climb unsafe guide towers. And let's talk about what's going on there. When a guide tower is designed to be supported by its guy wires, it's not designed to be supported by its base. This is really critical. There are one or two designs in the Roan catalog where they show a, maybe a Roan 25 tower with 2 or 3 sections and a small 2-meter width on the top. And that's about as far as you would go in terms of a guide style tower section being installed and used without guy wires. Certainly, if you're using a base section or a base that's a pier pin base, I don't know how many people here are familiar with the way, with tower construction, but you can put the base directly in the concrete, or you can use a base plate, which is either bolted down to the concrete pad or even just sits on the pad and is held there by the downward force of the guy wires. Anyways, so continue here. a guide tower must be truly safe to climb throughout its entire life, whether it's during the installation or removal of the tower, or during the lifetime of the tower when the permanent guides are all installed properly. This state of the tower being installed or removed is when most of these people are losing their lives or sustaining major injuries. This is a big deal and something that we need to be real careful about. Let's talk about that. You always have to guide the tower properly, even when it's being installed or removed. And that means sometimes it has to be guided properly when you're not using the permanent guides. So if you're putting up a tower, a roan tower, which has 10-foot sections, and the first set of guy wires you're going to put on the tower is at 30 feet. Well, what do you do between 0 and 30 feet before you get to 30 feet? Well, some people don't do anything. They just climb up that two or three sections of tower and hope that everything's okay when they get to the top of the third section and install the guys. Others will put ropes on and hope that that's going to hold. These are not the way you do it if you want to be safe. The temporary guys that you put on need to be solid. They need to be anchored at both ends on the tower and at the ground anchor point as if they were going to be permanent. They should be using wire rope, not soft nylon rope, and they should be done with proper terminations. They should be done at the vertical spacing on the tower that you would expect to be done for permanent installation, and even more conservative. For example, when you're putting up that first section, the right thing to do is to put wire wire rope guys at the top of section number 1, the first one going in, and pull those out tight to the guy anchors and tighten them up to the full strength, full tension that you would use if they were going to be permanent. And then when you climb that first 10 feet of tower, it's solid. It's solid as a rock, and you can be comfortable that you're going to be okay putting on that next section. And then you do the same thing at the top of the 20 feet. You can and then you can remove the lower ones and make them ready to go up at 30. I'm going to talk about this with a picture in a minute. So you get the idea. At any time that you're on the tower, before you step foot on the tower should be guided as solidly as it would be guided if you thought it was going to be permanent. And that's true in the course of installation and when you're doing a removal. So let's talk about that more specifically. Last summer, we did a tower takedown. This is a Roan 45 tower. It started as about a 100-foot tower, I think. And you see the picture here when there were 5 sections of tower left. The lower section had only maybe 4 feet exposed because it was embedded in the concrete base. And the lowest set of permanent guys are still attached right up there in the middle of, or somewhere on section A. So now we're going to go take this down. How are we going to take this down safely? So here's what we did. The first thing we did was we went and installed a set of fully tensioned wire rope guys just below that section B. So at the top of section C there, which is at about 25, 30 feet, 25-ish feet, okay? Then we took those guy wires that were the permanent guys and we moved them down to the middle of section D here, which is the second section up from the bottom. So think about it. Right now we have 2 sets of guy wires on this tower, both fully tensioned to the original concrete guy anchors. So what do we do next? Now we can climb up and we can remove 2 sections, A and B, because both of the sets of guys are on the tower below. They're at section C and below. Then we removed the upper set of temporary guys, and then we get off the tower. We got off the tower. There's only one set of guys left. It's that lower one right there. And what did we do? We removed those guys at the anchors, out at the anchors, 40, 50 feet away from the tower. And we went to the base of the tower and we cut the legs, because this was remember this guy, this base section was embedded in the concrete. Okay, so we weren't going to be able to do anything to save that section. So we cut it off and tipped the rest of the sections over. And nobody's on the tower when this thing wasn't properly guyed. That's the point. Okay. To reinforce this point, the section that you see here has a base plate. It was tipped on its side. This is the site. This is a picture of the site where one of those guys in the list earlier on lost his life. My understanding is that he had climbed to 10 feet, just 10 feet, had installed a second section and was trying to do something with guy wires, but the base was not able to keep those two sections vertical. And he was strapped in, tipped, leaned back, and this thing went over. And I don't know exactly what happened, but his injuries were severe enough to claim his life. Not good. My message is that you don't trust the base of any guide tower to hold the tower up at all, ever, during any part of the process. And so here are some different bases. This is a base that was excavated a bit, a foot or so below ground level, and look what's there. Heavily corroded, and could certainly have been a problem if somebody tried to climb that, not knowing that it was in that kind of condition. Here's another one. I don't know too much about what's going on here. What I see is a couple of heavy bolts, but I don't really know how this base is attached to the concrete below. Here's another one with some pins attaching this base to the gravel surface down below. Hard to say whether this has the strength to hold the tower up with a climber on it. And this base is the base of that tower that we took down. I didn't understand why they would have this triangular piece of concrete there and the legs going around on the three corners. It didn't make sense at all. So there was no reason to trust that base. So you get the idea. Okay. We've covered that topic. While you're putting up a tower, a guide tower, and taking down a guide tower, it just needs to be guyed correctly and full strength at all times. The second problem is when you fall off the tower, and the concept behind that is this concept of free climbing. Okay. Here are some pictures of hams from when I was growing up, maybe a little bit older than I am even. There's not a single piece of safety gear in sight in any of these pictures. And this was not uncommon. This is the way I grew up. I climbed quite frequently to 20, 30, 50 feet without any sort of climbing gear, safety gear. And this was part of the culture. Since this time, the commercial world has led in understanding the risks and trying to prevent it by introducing the proper equipment and techniques. This guy is doing what so many of us have done. He ran up there to tighten up a dipole or something, that rope. And there's data that shows that a fall from this high, which looks maybe like 15 feet off the ground, is enough to be a very, very, very severe fall. So free climbing, the definition of free climbing is not being 100% attached. That means from the moment you decide you're going to get on the tower to the moment you get off the tower, an hour or 5 hours later or whatever, you are always attached to the tower. with with something that is, you know, of substance. You're attached to a very strong part of the tower with a line that would hold you if you were to fall. And this is specified in the commercial world in OSHA regulations, and the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, provides actually much better, more in-depth regulation and recommendations. And so most organizations that do work that involve these kinds of risks follow both the OSHA and ANSI regulations. All right. Here are some pictures in the ham world of free climbing. Now notice that this guy is wearing some kind of a belt. Well, it is a belt, but I can't see it attached to the tower. And there are some other issues with what he's wearing. Now here's a guy who is working with somebody else, I believe. They're trying to get this antenna installed, and it looks like he had, the lower guy here, had to climb up the side of this crank up to untangle a rope or deliver a feed line or something. But he's not wearing any kind of fall protection gear at all. What does this look like? 2 words, happens in June. It's got to be field day, right?
Yeah.
And look at this guy at the top of this. This looks like another crank-up tower of some sort. And there are some ropes holding this tower up. And I'm going to guess that those ropes are attached to very, very light-duty anchors. They might be tent pegs for all I know. And he's up there and he's swinging this little lanyard around, and so he's not attached. And I don't see anybody on the ground looking up, even looking at the guy. So I think he's at some pretty serious risk. I'm waiting to give this presentation one day, and somebody's going to say, "Hey, that's my club." Here's another one. Look at this. Is there anything similar about those 2 pictures? I think this one's a little worse because the guy up on top doesn't have any kind of belt. He's not even thinking about being attached. Okay. This one here, the guy is wearing a full body harness, and he's got a helmet on. He's got some gloves on. It looks okay, but actually he is not properly attached. He's got what's called just a positioning lanyard that he's leaning back on. He's got nothing else to hold him up. And we'll talk in a minute about what the problem is with that. And so here's another guy. He's just wearing a positioning lanyard and strong arming this antenna up the tower. And then there's this other guy here. He's standing on the top of a Roan 25 tower. And I know that he's at about 78 feet. And that's a 2-inch chrome moly mast. And that's me. And that was some years ago before I started studying this stuff. Okay. All right. So what does it actually take to be properly attached, to implement this concept of 100% attached? And what I'm adding the new term fall arrest. To be 100% attached, you have got to have the right equipment. So now think about a climb up a tower, especially a tower that might have some guy wires on it. It might have some antennas on the side as well as on the top. As you make your way up the tower, you're encountering these obstacles, and the equipment that you use to stay 100% attached needs to have some flexibility. It needs to be able to be removed so that you can move around the obstacles but still remain attached. And if you fall, you want to fall as safely as you can fall. So there are 2 ways, there are 2 pieces of equipment that are part of a solution to this problem. It's probably the most popular in the ham radio community. It's the use of a full body harness and a dual fall arrest lanyard, things I'm going to show you in a second. Not only do you have to have the right equipment, you have to use it correctly. And you have to commit to this non-negotiable term that when you're on the tower, you're always going to be attached. You're going to be attached with one of these one of these with one of these lanyards. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to do a demo. Let's make sure I can do the demo. Yeah. Yeah. That's going to work. No, actually, hang on. All right, let me stop sharing for a second. All right, you see camera B here?
Yes. We see you.
All right, I'm gonna zoom in a little more. And if I stand up, am I, there we go. Okay, all right. I'm gonna show you some live demos here. All right, anybody recognize this thing?
Telephone company.
Yep, yep. This one was offered to me for sale by the guy who owned that tower that we took down. He was moving. It was time for him to leave that property. He needed the thing gone. And he said, I've got, by the way, Jim, I've got this fabulous belt that has done me well over the years. And if you'd like to buy it, I'll sell it to you for $50. I said, I will take that away from you. I will not give you a penny for it. And you should thank me for taking it off your hands. And I'm going to use it as Exhibit A. So here it is, Exhibit A. So this is a leather lineman's belt. It's got these two D rings on the side. And it's got these this lanyard that goes around the pole or the tower. And it's called a climbing belt. I would not like to call it a safety belt. It really doesn't have any safety features at all. If you're on the tower with this thing and you fall and you lose your footing and this thing is around the tower, what's going to stop your fall? Well, the first obstacle that, you know, on the tower, maybe a set of guy wires or some such thing might stop your fall. But this is not particularly safe. There have been instances when I may not be one of those guys, but there are some skinny guys around who have slipped out of this belt on falling. Okay, so this is not a good belt. You don't want to use one of those. I don't want to say that they are have been out of service and outlawed completely. Telephone company technicians still have them and use them sometimes, but their training pushes them away from using that belt, except in the most, you know, it's a worst case that situation where they might use one of those belts. Okay. Okay, this is Exhibit B. This is a synthetic materials belt. It's made by a company called Petzl. Petzl is, I think they're a Swiss company, and they make rock climbing gear and safety and rescue gear and all kinds of stuff. And, you know, everything is made to standards, to various commercial safety standards. However, this is only a waist belt. It goes around your waist. It has the addition of these thigh straps, which prevent that problem of falling out of the belt. So if you fell and you got stopped, no matter what position you were in, you're not going to fall out of the belt with these thigh straps on. The way I used the belt was with this green thing here, which is a positioning lanyard. And I cut the rope and tied the knots and used the carabiners, and it goes around the tower. This particular green belt is designed, I think, for a Roan 25 size tower. And it let me lean back just the right amount when I was on that size tower. And then I also came up with this. This was sort of on my own. I made this thing here. This is sort of a cattail arrangement where two ropes that go to this D-ring, which sits at the center at my belly button, right there. And as I climb the tower, I would move one of these hooks from one rung up, and I put the next one on the next rung, and you would always be attached by at least one of these ropes. Okay. Now, if I fell, if I lost my footing and fell, I would only fall as far as one of these ropes would allow, but I would be stopped by a sudden shock, a sudden stop, because the rope is just static rope. It has no stretch to it at all. And I would be stopped at and hung at my waist. Now, until the mid-90s or something like that, this kind of solution was considered okay in the commercial world, but eventually it was deemed insufficient because of a couple of things. One was if you fall and you're attached at the belly, you have a very strong potential to hurt your back very seriously, right? You're going to bend your back. The second thing is that this kind of a rope is, as I said, it's a static rope. It has no give in it at all. So that stop is going to be a real hard stop, and it's going to put a lot of stresses on your body. So they outlawed this thing. What came into vogue and is currently the standard is this kind of thing here. This is a full body harness. This is a full body harness. This is a high-end commercial harness. It supports you really using these straps that go over your shoulders. Okay, straps go over the shoulders and come down. They come down past your waist, and they go through, or they hold up these additional leg straps. So you still have those thigh straps that attach. And there's also the waist belt. But to be honest, the waist belt is really not part of the safety design of the belt. It's kind of a convenience feature and a comfort feature. So it's a nice padded belt. It goes around your waist, and it has the D-rings. It has the D-rings for attaching. This is the positioning lanyard that goes around the tower and connects to the other D-ring on the other side of the belt. And what's important, though, the most important thing is at the top, okay, on the back, and this sits right back here. This D-ring is where you attach the dual fall arrest lanyard that I was talking about, okay? And again, if you fall, you're going to be hanging vertically, your legs down. Your weight will be supported mainly by the leg straps, the thigh straps down below. It's probably the safest way you're going to land. Now, this is the most important part of the solution. This is the dual fall arrest lanyard. It's got two pieces here. This top hook up here, this hook attaches to the D-ring behind the neck. And as you climb the tower, you're climbing like this. You hook onto a spot on the tower here, and then you hook the next one up on here, and you climb up a step or two, and you alternate your way all the way up the tower. Okay, or to where we are next. One of the important things that OSHA tells us is that if you were to fall and be stopped and remember, what's gravity? 32 feet per second, 9.8 meters per second. And your weight contribute to a force, a downward force. And they recommend that the attachment point that you connect this hook to should be able to handle up to 5,000 pounds of downward force. Okay. What that means for climbing a Roan tower is that you really don't want to connect this to the rung of the tower. You want to connect this to the leg. Okay, the leg and the weld in the leg is stronger than the rung itself. So that's the story on these things. All right, let's switch back. Any comments or questions on that?
I have one question about the belt. That's a high-end commercial belt that you demonstrated, but how many amateur radio operators are going to afford to buy one of those things? You can't rent them anywhere, can you?
Right. You can't, and you probably don't want to rent one, honestly, because you want to use stuff that you know, that you want to use equipment that you're familiar with. Um, the the right thing to do is to buy what you can afford and that which is meets some standards. Most of our community is using equipment that just doesn't even meet the most basic requirements, like the idea of the dual fall arrest. That's so critical. Most of our community is climbing with a belt like the first or second one that I showed you, and not using any fall arrest stuff. They're just relying on the positioning lanyard around the tower. So what I hear a lot is yeah, I can kind of rely on that positioning lanyard. It feels comfortable. I can move it up and slide it up and down. But what you have to think about is the potential situation where something happens that makes you unable to control your own movements. So getting stung by a wasp, okay? Think about that. You get stung by a wasp and you're carrying something and you lose your footing, and you need to have something in place that's completely reliable in a situation like that. I have to tell you that in a couple of the cases that are in the data set here, we have people who lost consciousness. They had heart attack or stroke or something. Maybe they shouldn't have really have been on the tower in the first place, but they were, and they didn't have the right gear to handle a situation like that. So, anyways, we'll talk about that in a minute, because one of the solutions that we have to figure out is how to get people the gear they need at a price they can afford. Okay. All right. Let me go back to sharing. Okay, are we back?
Yes. We're back.
Yeah, I have a couple of slides and pictures in case I'm not, in case I don't have all the gear in front of me. Okay, so here I am on my tower. I'm at about 50 feet right now on the tower, and you can see that the spot that I'm at is right at some guy wires. Guy wires are going off in all directions, and my positioning lanyard is below the guy wires. Okay, and I'm wearing the full body harness. I've got that yellow lanyard connected in two places. One of them you can't see because it's behind on the other side, the far side of the tower. The other one in my right hand, I'm placing up around a leg of the tower up above. And it's going to take me a couple of maneuvers here in order to get above the guy wires and the side mount for the 20-meter beam that we're looking at there. So what's the next step? Next step is to remove the positioning lanyard. So I just let it go because it won't slide up past the guy wires. But I'm connected. I'm connected in two places, one on the far side and one up above. And from this point, I would just climb up a couple of steps at a time, a couple of rungs at a time, and alternately move the hooks for the two yellow. And when I'm at the point where there's no more obstacles, I will reattach the positioning lanyard at that point. Okay. All right. So I hope you got the point. I do want to make a couple of things about the gear. Number one is that, let's see, a couple of things. One is that there are more than one way to do this. The way that I've shown you here is a pretty flexible way because you can climb almost any kind of climbable tower with this approach. Another way that is done is with I forgot what it's called. It's there's a line. What's it called? Tough Tug. There's a brand, but basically the idea is that you put a taut line from the top of the tower to the base of the tower. It's permanently installed, and as you climb, you're attached to that line all the time. And there's a device that you are attached with, which only goes up unless you do some, unless you take some specific action on the mechanicals of it to loosen it up to allow it to go down. But generally, it goes smoothly up, and it's difficult to pull down. So if you fall, you only fall a foot or two because it's very close to where you are. It's attached to you, very close to the line. That's another alternate mechanism. It's not as easy to use in all different tower installations. In mine, I could never use it because I have all these side mounts and they're rotators, and they would run into that wire, that line going up and down the side of the tower. Okay. A second point I wanted to make was that having the right gear, you've got to be in the frame of mind to use it correctly. You have to know how to use it and use it, religiously. If you make a mistake, it can be a very costly mistake, even though you're wearing the right gear. And then finally, what was the last? I had one other point, which I can't remember. I'll probably remember as soon as we move on to some other slides. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about that last category called unsafe maneuvers. This one is much more difficult to define. These unsafe maneuvers come in all flavors. Here are two examples. The first example is a group of people who were trying to install a 30-foot high antenna support structure next to a house. The idea was it was going to be right at right near the foundation of the house, and it would be bracketed to the side of the house somewhere and hold an antenna up above the roof. Several people were in the process of tipping this thing up from horizontal to vertical. One person was up on the roof, kind of going to pull it in and catch it, and then somebody else was going to do attach it to the bracket. Well, the structure got out of control. It fell on nearby high voltage power lines, and two people at the bottom who were holding onto it lost their lives, and the person up on the roof who was catching it also was fatally injured. Okay, you can imagine the number of things that had to go wrong in order for something like this to happen. It's kind of a perfect storm. Here's another one. This is a case where this happened in the Pacific Northwest. A big antenna, of over 300-pound, 40-meter Yagi, was being removed from the top of from the mast of a 100-foot guide tower. There was one person on the tower, and there was a ground crew of 2 or 3 people, I believe. And they really didn't have the right tools. It appears from the stories that I've been able to read. And what happened? The antenna got loose, it fell, and it hit one of the top guy wires. Now remember, the guy wires are tensioned up tight, and if you lose one guy wire, the other 2 guy wires pulling in other directions are actually potentially going to pull the tower over, and that's what happened in this case. So what's common about all of these? It's about knowing your limits. It's about knowing when you have the right gear, the right people, the right amount of time, the right weather. All of those things need to be playing in your favor. And what you need to do is be aware. And I would say this is not just tower work. This is any antenna work, anything that that presents a safety hazard. You want to be thinking in terms of over budgeting on all of the resources that could potentially make you successful. This is difficult because the erosion of a plan. A plan starts to fall apart, and it sometimes falls apart kind of slowly. So you'll have six people come over at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's a long day of work. And everybody's fresh and well hydrated and well fed at the beginning of the day. Well, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, one of your climbers has decided he has to go home. Two other ground crew have left. You're getting tired up on the tower. The weather might be starting to change. And by 4 o'clock, 4:30, it's starting to get dark. And what if the job isn't done? And the job isn't done, and the contest starts at 8 o'clock that night. You face a decision about whether to try to finish or not finish. That's an example of the kind of situation that can get you in trouble. And of course, the right answer is to be conservative and not worry about the delay. Okay. I want to play an interview for you of a conversation I had with this fellow, Dennis Cornell, KL7HRO. I met him, he reached out to me after hearing me give this presentation on Ham Nation one night about 6 months ago. And I hope you'll be able to hear it okay. Click the button. Hey, Dennis, how long have you been a ham? And tell us a little bit about how you got started in tower climbing.
Hi, Jim. I'm glad to join you tonight. I've been an active ham since 1966. Long time ago. I'm 70 years old. I started climbing towers when I was 16 years old.
Tell me about how you learned to climb and how you gained knowledge about how to work on towers.
I learned the same way as many others my age. As a kid, I made it up as I went along. I was invincible. Looking back on those days, I can't believe some of the things I did. I just bought the towers and put them up. I had no help. I suggest you get an Elmer, somebody that knows how to do it. Somebody like yourself that can tell you the right things to do and the wrong things to do. I just winged it, and I was lucky up until 2012.
Tell us what happened in 2012.
Oh, Lord. Well, in 2012, I was taking down a 50-foot guide tower. I was working alone. I didn't tell my girlfriend I was outside. I was belted in at 30 feet. I had it down to 30 feet, and it was guide at 30 feet. And the tower guys were still attached. It had been a long day. I had done this job many times before, and I knew what I needed to do next. I should have put guy ropes at 20 foot, but I didn't. I made a bad choice, a choice that changed my life forever. I decided to trust the base to hold the tower up while I completed the job. While on the tower, I removed one of the remaining 3 guy wires, setting off a devastating chain of events. The tower came crashing down with me on it. It happened that quick. I ended up with a blown shoulder. The right elbow was gone, broken ribs, pelvis, and hip. I'm permanently disabled as a result of that one tiny decision. I was lucky, though. Had I been on a different side of the tower, I would have been crushed and would not be here to talk to you today. I hit a 4-foot diameter tree trunk.
You've had years of experience, and you've done this job before. Was there something that you missed, something you should have done?
Oh boy, yeah. I lived by always guying the tower. I should have put ropes on it at 20 feet, okay? And then when I dropped 10 foot down, I should have dropped down another set of guys and guided at 10 feet. I broke my own rule, and it almost killed me.
Tell us a little bit about what you learned. What were the key lessons from that experience, and how can our listeners here avoid learning these lessons the same hard way that you did?
Well, have a good safety harness on. Get help. Tell people that you're going up. Don't do it yourself. I was macho. I knew how to do it. I've been doing it for 45 years. Get help. Admit you can't do it by yourself. And then do it right. Do it safely. And live to tell somebody else how to do it correctly.
Thanks, Dennis. It's been great having you with us.
Thanks.
Okay. I hate to tell you that Dennis's story, that story that he told was almost repeated, almost identically by another climber in August of this year. That story about taking a tower down and not guying it correctly is something that we really need to get out of our culture. It needs to not happen anymore. Okay, so now talking about how do we make change, and we're getting towards the end here, guys. I've been going a little long. I've been a little more long-winded tonight than usual. Okay, so first of all, there's the idea of change at the individual level. You and I, we need to decide that we're going to make the change. And what do? Well, for me, I learned about this stuff. I studied up as much as I could. I bought some gear, but I made the choice. This is the important thing. You have to decide that the safety side of things has to be a top priority. It just has to rise right to the top. I spent the money for the gear. I bought used equipment. I didn't buy new. I checked it out as best I could. I had somebody who knew the stuff well look at it and give me the okay. I got the full body harness, the lanyard, and the work and a helmet. By the way, the helmet that I'm showing in the picture here is not my good one. It's an old one. It's an old Bell Atlantic helmet from a hard hat from a lineman who was here one day and left it. Anyways, there's always room for improvement. That's the point there. The hard cost in that was about $500. And compared to most tower jobs, if you're putting up an antenna, replacing a rotator or something, $500 is kind of in the range of what a big job on a tower might be worth anyways. So instead of doing that next job or delaying it a little bit, you insert this cost and get this out of the way, get it behind you. But there's also what I call the soft costs. The soft costs are that climbing with this stuff on is a little bit more inconvenient. It takes you more time. And I have not been able to regain all of that time back as I've gotten better at climbing with the gear on, but I've learned to accept it. So, and others around me have to learn to accept it. When I tell the guys I'm climbing the tower now, it's going to take me a while to get to the position where I need their help. Okay. But it's not just about doing this at the community level. There are so many of us out there who are not aware of these risks. I have seen on social media, on Facebook, on different ham radio communities online, new hams who are asking questions like, hey, there's a guy in my neighborhood who has an old TV tower bolted to the side of the house. I'd love to go up and take the antenna down and then take the tower away. And this is somebody who has had no experience with this kind of stuff at all. We need to get the word out so that people who think about doing these kinds of jobs are aware of these risks and know how to mitigate those risks before they start to do it. They don't want to learn it the hard way. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to work with people who are at all different levels of awareness and knowledge. There are those who are just simply unaware. There are those who know that there's risk, but they haven't decided to get motivated to do something about it. We need to help them. And then finally, we even need to deal with those who know about it and simply say, hey, it's not your business what I do on my tower in my backyard. Well, in fact, it is, because if you get hurt, it reflects on all of us. And we need to have a community that is known for safety and being responsible. All right. To do this, and this is what I'm doing by doing these presentations, we need to get out there and make people aware. We need to educate people on what is the right way to go about these things, and we need to enable them. What does enable mean? The question was asked earlier about buying a fancy harness like this. How much does it cost? Where can I get one? Where do I get the equipment to do the proper temporary guying of a guide tower? All of those things need to be addressed. We need to kind of figure out ways to reduce the barriers and give people the tools they need to do this work safely. So what we've actually done is to create a group called the Zero Falls Alliance. Its whole focus is on getting these safety issues under control. We're recruiting people from the individuals within our own community, some of our vendors and dealers and distributors and others in the industry side, as well as membership organizations, clubs and the like, can all help to bring the attention that this needs and some of the resources that we need. We built a website. It's called zerofalls.org. You can go to it. I recommend you do. If you look at the top of the page here on the upper right, you see there's a button that says take the pledge. That's basically a sign up. If you go in there, you sign up, you'll go through a little process where we'll ask you to read this little pledge thing. It says, I'll be aware, I'll be patient, I'll focus on the job. Basically, do the basic things that will shift your thinking to be thinking about safety all the time. Give us your name. There's an opportunity to contribute some money if you'd like, and it does cost us to get this stuff going and some of the other programs that we're putting together. But once you get in there, there are some resources that you'll have access to. Let me just show you one of them, climbing gear. We've developed a relationship with a company called GME Supply. They are the largest worldwide supplier of fall protection equipment for the commercial world. They sell everything. And we spoke to them about the kinds of work that we do as hams, and they came up with these packages. So we have an entry-level package called the Budget Kit, in which you get a full body harness, you get a dual fall arrest lanyard, you get a tool bucket, you get a bag to carry all this stuff, you get, what else you get? You get a hard hat. Basically, you get a kit that gives you all that you need to be compliant. All of these things are compliant with the OSHA and ANSI specifications. There's a second one as well called the premium kit, and it gives you a little more flexibility. Instead of a fixed positioning lanyard, it gives you an adjustable one like the one you saw that I showed you earlier. These guys are great to work with, by the way. If anybody wants to look into this, you can buy one of these kits, or the people that we work with will set you up with whatever you need. If you just want to buy the hard hat to get started, you can do that. They've been great partners. We have a board for this organization that it consists of people from our own community who are in the safety world in their work as in their professional lives. We've got people who run tower installation and management companies. We've got a guy who is a NASA flight surgeon, deals with safety related to space travel. Pretty cool. A lot of that could be relevant to us. And we've got a lot of clubs and other membership organizations who have signed up to help out in some way. Some have given some money. Others have just raised awareness by giving this presentation themselves, or committing to give a version of this presentation to their club every year, just to make sure their members and new hams are aware of what's of the issues and opportunities here. That's kind of it. I'd recommend you go check out the website, and I don't have to go over the rest of this. I'll zip over to thank you and discussion. Any questions that you'd like to raise? Love to hear them. And any comments on the material.
Jim, I have a comment. I'm Barry Burge, KD4MCB. That answered my question about where we're going to get this equipment. That was really good. That's a great, that looks like a great source. one thing I'd like to add is that climbing gear, it can be very versatile. It's not, you don't use it just to climb your towers. You know, sometimes if you got to work anytime you work high, you should be tied off.
Yep.
And that's a great
That's
system they've
that's
got.
a great point. You know, Barry, one of the things I have noted in having given this presentation to clubs all over the country, even some outside the U.S., is I tend to learn something or pick up something new in every time with every audience. Well, you just gave me a good new one. We should amortize the cost of that safety gear over not just your ham radio stuff, but maybe you're fixing your gutters or whatever, whatever else.
Climb up on the roof. You know,
Guys, I need to excuse myself for 1 second.
Roger, I'm expecting you to tell them about your collapsible tower.
Oh my God. Well, that's just one of many, Jerry, but I'm not proud of it. I was a free climber since 1975.
Nobody wants to
left
buy
us hanging.
Not many people like to climb in the area, so the only people I climbed for were the old timers that couldn't do it.
Good.
I have a tower for sale.
My idea.
After the last 2 weeks of our ham radio news, the last 2 weeks has been on tower safety by a 50-year climber. And between that and tonight, I have no interest in putting up my 42-foot crank up aluminum tower. So I'm serious.
yeah, it's not, you know.
I'm getting too old for this stuff.
Gotta weigh it. Gotta weigh the risk.
I think I'll put it on the swap net next week.
Good towers.
This is Walt. One thing I would like to mention is whenever you're going to do work off the ground, whether it's putting up a tower or somebody's going up on a roof and you got more than one person involved, the first thing you got to do is at the beginning is you got to have a meeting, and you got to figure out everybody in the team has to know exactly what's going to happen, who's going to do what, and what everybody's responsibility is. And everybody on the team has to know that they have the right to say, wait a minute, this isn't safe. We got to come up with a better plan. You don't ever want anybody to see something that could be done a better way and not say anything. So I just wanted to get that in, but back to you, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the break. Apologize. I have found that there are people that I can work with really smoothly and easily on the tower or on the ground or whatever, and sometimes actually forming the team is an important piece of it. You know, the team that you want is a team that's fairly knowledgeable, has seen a lot of the techniques before, and kind of knows what to expect. And not everybody is cut out for this. What else? I'm probably going to go to a friend's house tomorrow. I may go tomorrow, where he has a big job we have to do. A storm took the tip out of one of the elements of his 40-meter Yagi. So it was like, it's a reflector or a director. It's like the furthest one out. And this is another one of those big antennas. I think this is a 250-pound antenna. I don't know what it is. And tomorrow, he and I are just going to climb and we're going to look at it. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to go up there and scope it out and see if there's a plan and try to figure out how we will attack this problem. I'm actually worried that it might not be very doable. And I've already committed to myself that I'm going to be willing to say, this is not a job I'm up to, and you may need a professional to come in and do this, or do it a different way, with a bucket truck.
Yeah.
That's oh, but by the way, one of the safest ways, or one of the ways to make climbing safe is to eliminate climbing, right?
Yeah.
So I know of two ways to do that. One is for actual work is to use the bucket or the crane and have an experienced person in the crane, in the bucket. The other way, which I have used here, is with a drone for inspections. There are situations where you just need to go see if there's a problem, and you can see it with a drone. And if you can avoid climbing up 40 feet or 30 feet or 80 or 90 feet by doing that, one less climb is one less opportunity for a problem.
You might want to consider, there's a lot of drones in the ham radio world before you do that tomorrow.
Well,
Talk about a drone.
yes, it's a good, well, so in this case, yeah, you're probably right. We probably do part of it. I think we probably end up up there anyways. He's got some kind of a tilting mechanism for this antenna. He can tilt the elements vertical, and he says it hasn't been touched for 15 years. So I'm thinking that we're going to go up there with a can of what's it called? PB Blaster.
Blaster. Yeah, blaster.
And blast a lot of that stuff up there. So
don't get it in your eyes.
oh, okay. Thank you.
There's a lot to be said for 100 watts in a wire.
Yes, sir.
Well,
there is.
I have one ham philosophy commentary. We all know about ham fests, and we know about how somebody can have a $3,000 radio at home, but they'll walk away from a $8 item because you won't let them have it for $5. It's along the lines of brains are willing, the body's not. There's a whole lot of these things about staying within your comfort zone and not attacking things. When I look at a $325 or a $500 cost for equipment, you can't put up a 50-foot tower with a rotor and an antenna and all the coax without spending a few $1,000s. And on top of that, the safety equipment, many hams would view as being an unnecessary expense, and yet it's probably the first expense they should have, not the last. And I guess that's as we, I've been a ham for, 57 years, older and wiser. I used to jump off the roof of my parents' house to get down quick. Okay, so I won't do that now, and I frankly don't go up on the roof either. So you learn as you go, but it's
I have to say that although I have that problem of, it's not a problem. The nature of the work now is that it goes slower because of the gear, but the idea of setting foot on the tower now without the gear on, I would feel completely naked now.
right.
And your mindset changes, and it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Right.
And I have many close friends who have big towers. In the contesting community, you don't get anywhere without a big one, and some of these are lifelong friends, and I didn't know how they climb, and I am now becoming the guy who is starting to try to enlighten them, and it's not easy. But when I see some of my friends having really, really serious incidents, and I can count up to almost 4 or 5 on a hand who are close friends who have really big things that caused them permanent damage. I've decided that I can't hold back anymore. If I see it, I'm going to call it out. And the guy that I'm going to climb with tomorrow, who has this thing, he had come over sometime within the last year to my house to work on a problem, and I didn't ask him about any of this. And he came up, and he didn't have any kind of a fall arrest lanyard, and we were up. One of the things on my tower is a ring rotor. Anybody know what the ring rotor?
Yeah.
Ring rotor is not an easy thing to climb around. You've got to, it's a pain. And we had to get above the ring rotor, and he did it while not attached. And he didn't have the right stuff. I didn't know it at the time. And I was kind of mortified as it was all happening. I didn't say a word to him while he was up there. I mean, last thing I want to do. But then I took him out for lunch. We were at the Indian restaurant and we were eating some saag paneer. And I said, this is the last time that we'll climb together unless you get the stuff. And he said to me, then he said, well, I think I have the thing you were using in a box somewhere.
Keepers.
Well, you don't want to get it
What
dirty.
it was for.
Oh, no.
And I told him, I said, and next time you come over, bring it and use it, and don't worry about it, and and thank you. And he was easy to push over the cliff on the cliff. He was easy to convince. I have other friends who are not as easy to convince. I say to them, you really should be doing this, and they say, well, my formula has been working for the last 35 years or 45. And I worry about those guys. So I'm going to keep working those guys. Well, I appreciate your
nice,
attention.
Bob.
I don't think we lost. We didn't. I
You
think
didn't
the
lose
highest
any. You didn't lose anybody. You're
I
doing
saw
well.
29 at most, and we're at 27. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
My
Good
biggest
Thank you, Jim.
price-
We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Jim. It's
thanks
really
for
great.
sharing.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Give him a round of
Thanks.
applause.
Does the club have a website?
Yes.
Yes.
www.ragsclub.org. RAGSCLUB.org.
Oh, I had a joke I was going to make earlier. and it's probably been said before. I hope my presentation brought you a step closer from rags to riches.
No.
Hey, we like that.
No.
We like that. That's
Oh,
good.
no.
It's like,
You
well, we
just
got a
ruined
lot.
it.
We don't have a lot of riches in rags, but we're doing all right. Anyhow,
What I would love to do is get you guys to sign up as some kind of supporter of this Zero Falls, and I can send whoever the webmaster is a logo that you can put up on the website.
that'll be great.
Yep.
Who do we
idea.
send the Andre KD2KUB is our webmaster. He just put up on the screen there. He's the
Okay.
webmaster, but I'm the treasurer. And if we sent something into you folks, where does it go? We just do it on your website?
So you can do it as an individual and identify a club that you're associated with. That will work. It's like
We'll do it.
PayPal,
Okay.
PayPal kind of thing. It's easy.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Good.
And don't feel pressured. But any little thing would be appreciated.
I've already had a few calls about it while you're talking. So,
Okay, cool.
and you'll probably get some calls to give this presentation other places. So, you may spread,
So that, I got to tell you, let's see, this one is the third one this month, and I have 3 more this month.
Good.
What I'm realizing is I do have some other people on the team already, but we need to do a train the trainer thing, because I can't educate all 800,000 of us licensees in the U.S.
Good. Excellent.
So we, a volunteer from this group who would like to do this or learn how to do it or whatever, that'd be great.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
I enjoyed it.
Jim, thanks for
And
sharing.
I need you to send me a link to the video recording when it's available so that I can download it.
Andre, you're on. We put this on record and we sent it to the cloud. Do you know how to send him a link? He got it. He says got it. So
Okay. All right.
he'll
Awesome.
take care of it.
All right, everybody.
Thanks.
Jim.
Enjoyed it.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Good night, everybody.
73.
Look forward to next month.
Okie dokie.
See you next month.
Okay.
You look good, Walt.
7-3, everybody. Have a great week.
Good to hear from you, Barry. Bye-bye.
See you, Barry.
Take care, Barry.